Have you ever felt the call of the deep, beckoning you to explore its mysteries? Well, on April 6, 1994, a cave diver and explorer ventured into the Zacaton Sinkhole for a dive into the mysterious depths. Little did he know that things would take a turn for the worse. This is Fatal Tragedies with the story of Sheck Exley. Sheck Exley, an American cave diver, was born on April 1, 1949, and tragically passed away on April 6, 1994. In a unique and memorable event, Exley married fellow cave diver Mary Ellen Eckhoff while submerged in the Thunderhole cave system on October 29, 1983. The ceremony was officiated by Henry Nicholson. Tragically, 11 years later, Exley lost his life at the tender age of 45 during an ambitious dive in Zacaton, northeast Mexico, in collaboration with fellow explorer Jim Bowden. Despite the lack of training and safety standards in the early days of cave diving, Sheck became an expert and a prominent figure in the community. In 1979, he authored the book Basic Cave Diving: A Blueprint for Survival, which is still considered the definitive guide for the sport, focusing on safety and emergency procedures. Sheck's expertise was unmatched, having logged over 100 cave dives by age 23 and more than 4,000 dives by his mid-40s. Exley's influence extended beyond cave diving into the realm of extreme deep scuba diving, where he pushed the boundaries of exploration. He also contributed to the standardization of safety equipment, notably popularizing the octopus, a redundant second-stage diving regulator essential for rescue scenarios and gas sharing among divers in emergency situations. His passion for diving deep pushed him to become an ultimate competitor, despite the increased risks associated with extreme depths. The deeper a diver goes, the more they face the crushing pressure of water, which can be dangerous for those not prepared. Additionally, depth affects the body internally, leading to conditions like nitrogen narcosis and decompression sickness, which can occur suddenly and with very little warning. However, Sheck seemed to possess unique abilities that enabled him to withstand these challenges, making him exceptionally skilled at deep diving. Speaking of nitrogen narcosis, as you dive deeper, nitrogen can build up in your bloodstream too quickly for your body to handle, leading to a condition called nitrogen narcosis. This can make a person feel intoxicated, similar to being drunk, with impairments like hallucinations and dizziness, which are extremely dangerous, especially at great depths. To combat this, divers use gas mixtures with less nitrogen the deeper they go. However, Sheck seemed almost immune to nitrogen narcosis. While assisting two divers attempting a depth record in 1970, Sheck reached 465 feet before experiencing any effects of narcosis, unlike the other divers who tragically died due to it. Sheck also achieved the remarkable feat of being the first person to die below 800 feet in a technical scuba diving accident. He never experienced decompression sickness, also known as the bends, which occurs when nitrogen absorbed during descent floods back into the bloodstream too quickly, forming bubbles. These bubbles can be fatal if severe enough. Decompression stops during ascent to help release nitrogen slowly, preventing bubble formation. Sheck's immunity to these conditions gave him a significant advantage. By 1994, Sheck held the record for the 3 deepest dives of all time, including a dive to 881 feet a few years earlier. However, he aimed to go even deeper. His friend and diving partner, Jim Bowden, told him about a cave called Zacaton, believed to have the deepest known sinkhole in the world. This revelation sparked Sheck's desire to push his limits further. Zacaton is a thermal water-filled sinkhole found in the Zacaton system, a collection of unique karst features located in Aldama municipality near the Sierra de Tamaulipas in Tamaulipas, Mexico. With a total depth of 1,112 feet, it ranks among the deepest water-filled sinkholes globally. Using an autonomous robot, the underwater portion of Zacaton has been measured at 1,047 feet deep, with a 66-foot difference between the cliff rim and the water surface, contributing to the overall depth. Among the 5 sinkholes in Rancho La Azafrosa, Zacaton is the only one with noticeable water flow. The name Zacaton derives from the free-floating islands of zacate grass that move on the surface with the wind. Additionally, scrapings from the rock wall below the surface have revealed the presence of at least 3 new phyla of bacteria. In 1993, when Sheck saw Zacaton for himself, his enthusiasm soared. Despite being typically stoic and mild-mannered, he exhibited childlike excitement after resurfacing from his first dive there. Immediately, Sheck and Jim began planning a dive that would take them to depths of 1,000 feet or more. Over the next year, they meticulously discussed and examined every detail, ensuring perfection. This included calculating the gas blend and amount needed, as well as conducting numerous practice dives to prepare mentally and physically. Their thorough planning resulted in a solid and specific plan. They assembled a support team, including divers Ann Kristovich and Marcus Gary, along with Sheck's wife, Mary Ellen, and Jim's wife, Karen. Rather than entering Zacaton directly due to surrounding rock faces, they planned to enter from a nearby spring and swim through a 600-foot tunnel connecting the 2 points. Weighted guide ropes were set up in the center for their descent and ascent. Jim would descend first, followed by Sheck after 10 seconds to avoid collisions. Their plan involved a rapid descent at a rate of 100 feet per minute, aiming to touch the bottom quickly and begin ascending immediately to minimize decompression time. Despite using precise gas mixtures across over 30 tanks, including nitrogen, oxygen, and helium for rapid decompression, the return trip to the surface would still require approximately 10 hours and 50 stops. Despite being physically fit, Sheck, now 45, contemplated his future in diving throughout the planning process. He realized that the invincibility of his youth was fading, a fact brought to his attention during a dive at Bushman's Hole in South Africa. Nevertheless, they set the dive date for April 6, 1994, just 6 days after Sheck's 45th birthday, coinciding with the spring break from teaching. On April 6, 1994, Sheck Exley and his diving partner, Jim Bowden, embarked on their little project at the Zacaton Sinkhole in Mexico. They began by starting a new dive line and swimming through a 600-foot passageway to reach the sinkhole. After completing their equipment check, they signaled their readiness with a nod to each other and separated to follow their respective descent lines. Jim descended first, followed shortly by Sheck, who remained about 25 to 30 feet apart but connected by guidelines. They carefully monitored these guidelines as they descended, understanding the potential consequences of any mistakes. After descending for some time, they exchanged nods to confirm their progress, prompting Jim to continue his descent. He paused briefly at around 10 feet before entering into a freefall. During the descent, both divers maintained a deliberate breathing pattern, taking slow, deep breaths to optimize gas consumption and prevent carbon dioxide buildup. They understood the importance of maintaining this pattern, as any alteration could affect their calculations and lead to complications. Their descent was planned to last between 10 to 12 minutes, during which they remained vigilant and focused on maintaining their breathing rhythm to ensure a safe journey to their intended depth. To manage decompression and gas effectively, Jim planned a rapid descent with a rate of 100 feet per minute to 300 feet, then to 600 feet. However, he intended to slow down when reaching around 750 to 800 feet due to previous experiences with high-pressure nervous syndrome at similar depths in Bushman's Hole, South Africa. Both Jim and Sheck breathed from their air cylinders until reaching a depth of 290 feet. At this point, Sheck staged his air cylinder by fixing it to the line. Jim, on the other hand, utilized a small pony cylinder at his back-mounted cylinder for air supply. They later switched to trimix containing 10.5% oxygen, 50% helium, and the remainder nitrogen, suitable for deep dives below 290 to 580 feet. Their well-planned gas mixes ensured a safe dive. The dive was going according to plan, but as Jim crossed the 800 feet mark, he saw a light shining in front of him. He could see Sheck's light far away. In the meantime, Sheck continued into the distance, and he was going at a faster rate than before. Usually, this rate of descent is so fast that it could lead to high-pressure nervous syndrome. At 700 feet, his body couldn't take it anymore and it started going into fits. His vision was obstructed by hundreds of small concentric circles of sparkling dots, and he started experiencing itching and stinging all over his body. This was high-pressure nervous syndrome, brought about by several rapid compressions. The extreme presence of his descent had affected his brain function, and this caused his neural circuits to run wild. At 750 feet, Sheck stopped considering his options, which was to abort the descent or continue further down. He decided to continue his descent, but at a slower rate. When Sheck reached the bottom of the cave at around 860 feet, his body began shaking uncontrollably, likely due to the extreme depth and pressure. Despite this, he pressed on, albeit with impaired vision caused by high-pressure nervous syndrome. Despite his blurred vision, Sheck recognized the lunar-like landscape covered in small rocks and nearly a foot of black sediment, confirming that he had reached an unexplored depth. Aware that a prolonged stay at such depths would require extensive decompression, resulting in additional hours underwater, Sheck decided to ascend. He inflated his buoyancy device and started rising. As he ascended, the symptoms of high-pressure nervous syndrome gradually subsided, providing him with relief. Meanwhile, Jim at 900 feet realized that he had consumed more air than anticipated, potentially complicating his ascent and highlighting the challenges of deep-water exploration. As Jim continued his ascent, he became increasingly concerned about potential regulator failure, which could have catastrophic consequences. To mitigate this risk, he inflated his buoyancy control device, halting his descent at 920 feet. He switched from his main tank to his backup tank at 450 feet to ensure a continuous air supply. However, when he attempted to use his backup tank, the regulator broke off forcefully, causing panic. Despite managing to reattach the regulator, Jim remained unsettled as it was no longer securely fastened. He had to manually open and close the valve with each breath, adding to the stress of the situation. Jim encountered around 8 minutes of decompression stops between 350 feet until reaching the next stage bottle. Upon reaching it, he switched to the staged air, relieved to have a functioning regulator once more. At 250 feet, Jim switched to another air tank and noticed that Sheck's descent line and stage bottles remained untouched, indicating that something was amiss with his diving partner. As Jim continued his ascent for decompression, his heart sank at the realization that Sheck had not resurfaced. He tried to console himself with the hope that Sheck had descended far below and would soon emerge. However, he couldn't shake the concern and questioned why Sheck would risk diving so deep into such a dangerous sinkhole. Jim began his decompression ascent, a process that would take up to 9 hours. Meanwhile, Kristovic, their support diver, remained on the surface, monitoring the bubbles from the divers below. After about 18 minutes, Kristovic noticed that only Jim's bubbles were visible, indicating that Sheck's ascent had halted. Concerned, Kristovic exchanged glances with Jim's wife, Karen, before diving to meet him at the 47-minute mark. Upon reaching Jim, Kristovic was relieved to find him safe, but was shocked to see Sheck's equipment untouched, suggesting that he'd not surfaced as expected. As Mary Ellen, Sheck's wife, watched from the cliff, unaware of the unfolding crisis, she eventually joined Jim's wife, Karen, to assess the situation. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Mary Ellen prepared herself by taking an extra stage bottle and plunged into the water to find her husband. Upon reaching Jim and Kristovic, Mary Ellen's fears began to materialize as she realized the severity of the situation. The tension and apprehension grew as they continued their search for Sheck, hoping for a positive outcome. Mary Ellen swiftly communicated her plan to search for Sheck's bubbles using a dive slate and descended to 250 feet, but unfortunately found no signs of him. Meanwhile, Jim's wife, distraught and crying, joined Mary Ellen at 150 feet as she ascended. Jim, realizing that Karen had ascended beyond the safe decompression depth, took control of her gauge, which indicated a depth of 278 feet. He held her down for more than 40 minutes of decompression, a somber and challenging period for both of them. Tragically, it was at the 60-foot stop that Jim learned of Sheck's fate. The remaining decompression period was a painful reminder of their loss as they grappled with the reality that Sheck hadn't made it out alive. Sheck, at age 45, had met his end during the dive, making Jim the first diver to successfully surpass the 900-foot mark on self-contained scuba air with a record depth of 925 feet, surpassing Sheck's previous record of 881 feet. Upon returning to the surface, Jim was treated for his physical ailments, including shoulder pain, with oxygen, corticosteroids, and hydration. On April 7, 1994, Kristovic and the support divers returned to the sinkhole to recover equipment from both guidelines. Sheck's equipment was found to be heavy, including the steel tanks, necessitating the use of a pulley system for recovery. After 2 days of effort, Sheck's body surfaced, with lines tied around his arms and the valve of his mounted bottles at his side. While some of his equipment remained intact, including his BC with gas and a working inflator, his wrist-mounted dive computer indicated a maximum depth of 904 feet, suggesting that the incident occurred 9 minutes into the dive. The gases in his cylinder were found to have an accurate mix, and the autopsy, though challenging due to the effects of immediate decompression and the delay in conducting the post-mortem analysis, yielded no definitive cause of death. Well, have you ever dreamed of discovering hidden treasures beneath the waves? Share your thoughts in the comment section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more exciting expeditions. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll catch you next time.